Donald Trump's plans to dismantle Obamacare?
So where does this leave us in terms of dismantling Obamacare?
Yes.
I'll tell you that it is actually very frightening because the analysis shows, and one of the reasons why folks were moving away from just a repeal of the ACA to a repeal and replace strategy, an R&R strategy, I call it, because under the repeal strategy, 32 million Americans, at least 32 million Americans would lose coverage and access to vital health services. Under the current situation, a repeal and replace situation, 22 million would lose coverage under the ACA.
They are shocking statistics.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what would happen if Trump's vision were to come to fruition? I mean, it's repeatedly been knocked back, but clearly this is something that he will not let go.
Oh, he sure won't, and I don't understand it. 32 million would lose insurance. We also understand that 110 million Americans who are getting preventive services. So these are wellness visits. Whenever you go for a checkup for depression, or you're going in for diabetes screening, or cancer screening, et cetera, all of that is covered under Obamacare at no cost sharing to the consumer. That would be gone away. In addition to that, we're also talking about critical essential health benefits that were included for the first time in American history in a healthcare law. These are critical services like mental health and substance use disorder benefits. So folks who have a mental illness, who have are suffering from depression or anxiety or other ailments, they would lose their critical mental health coverage. There are folks who have disabilities. Rehabilitative and habilitative coverage was included to help people who were born without the ability to use a certain function. They would lose the ability to get critical therapy, occupational physical therapy that's needed to help them gain a certain function, whether a cognitive or other function. And in addition to that, there were also other requirements such as maternity coverage. We know that 90% of women in the individual market before Obamacare were discriminated against. They thought they had maternity health coverage, and guess what? They didn't until it was too late. They found out they got pregnant. When they needed it, they couldn't use it because it wasn't a part of their plan. That, too, would go away under Trump's plan.
You make a very persuasive series of points there, Daniel, and I think many people will be nodding in agreement with you. But we have had people in this studio, Republicans, saying that this kind of care, this Obamacare, will bankrupt people, is something that is actually too expensive.
Well, actually, I argue the opposite. It would bankrupt folks if they were to get rid of Obamacare, because then they would not have a safety net. When we were designing the Affordable Care Act, it was designed to strengthen and expand the safety net. So many of our vulnerable citizens who aren't able to get access to health insurance through their employer, they would have this safety net to fall on. And we know that prior to the Affordable Care Act passing, before President Obama signed it into law, many individuals found themselves on the other end of bankruptcy. The majority of individuals going bankrupt in our country, the number one reason was because of healthcare bills in America. So to get rid of Obamacare would actually do quite what they say would happen if they didn't repeal.
So the statistics, as you're pointing out there, Daniel, give the lie to what the Republicans have said all along in terms of their argument against Obamacare. A recent survey by Bloomberg says that the issue of healthcare top of the agenda now for US voters, ahead of all other issues. So clearly this is something Trump has to get right, or it could be another issue that comes back to bite him.
That's absolutely right. In fact, 2/3 of the people who are benefiting from Obamacare have a high school education or less. These are the majority of which actually voted for President Trump. So he's got to tread very carefully. And I think that, you know, the Republican senators, many Republican senators, moderate Republican senators, whose states have expanded Medicaid or have implemented Obamacare, they recognize that if they were to repeal Obamacare, it would have devastating consequences for their constituents. And that's why you see many of them vocalizing their opposition to repealing this. Trump, on the other hand, I don't think he quite grasps just how serious this is. At one point, I thought he did when he called the House Republican bill a very mean bill. And I thought perhaps with the Senate, he would recognize that as a case. But I think that there is a deep-seated hate for President Obama and his legacy that President Trump is willing to actually do whatever it takes to dismantle that and take away a key piece of President Obama's legacy.
As you point out, many people benefit because of the Obamacare legislation, something that gives them the health care that clearly people need. Daniel Dawes, we need to leave it there. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us, legal health specialist and author of the book 150 Years of Obamacare. We will, of course, watch all developments on this issue for you here on Frostbank.